As much as you might love to see Munster and Leinster, it is just hard to argue with just the sheer facts of it all. Saracens are the team to beat in this campaign, Cian, at the moment, and it's no disrespect to Munster to say that, Saracens probably are on paper big favourites at the very least.
No, they definitely are, and they're getting their players back at the right time. Like I mentioned earlier, you look at Owen Farrell coming back into the team. How many points was it? 50 odd they scored against Glasgow in the quarter-final without their chief playmaker, which is phenomenal. Mako Vunipola might be back. Brad Barrett is going to be back. It looks like he's a player who's massively important to what they do, so they're getting their big guys back. Munster are missing a couple of them, but like I was saying to Quinny there, the biggest thing for Munster is to fire a shot. They didn't do it last year in Bordeaux against Racing. They were nearly worse again at the Aviva against Saracens because it was such a negative game plan. Like Quinny was saying, they kicked the leather off the ball. So as long as they go out and fire a shot, I think they'll be happy with where they've got. Not that they'll be happy to lose in the semi-final, don't get me wrong, but as long as they show a better version of themselves.
Okay, we do have a few more rugby stories to get to this morning. First though, here's Brian O'Driscoll on Leinster against Toulouse this Sunday.
It would be difficult viewing for Leinster as well, in that they got outplayed for large parts of that game, so they'll feel that they've used up their get out of jail card and that they won't get a second bite with a Toulouse team. I went over and saw their semi-final in the La Défense arena, and they were sublime. So Toulouse are well and truly back.
The performance levels then against Ulster, do you put that down to just an off day, or simply that Leinster can't get to the level they want if they don't have Toner, Sexton, Henshaw on the pitch?
The best teams are Barcelona ever as good without Messi? No, they're not. So
which one of them is Messi?
but even the amalgamation of the three of them, combines something that the great players, in football or any sport bring, and the comfort that seeing a Dev Toner, seeing a Robbie Henshaw, seeing a Johnny Sexton in the team sheet. For all the other players, the comfort that brings, it's an intangible, where immediately confidence is higher. I looked at that Leinster team in the quarter-final and I saw vulnerability for the first time. They're playing Sean O'Brien at 7, but ordinarily if Josh van der Fleer and Dan Levy were fit, would he be getting in the team? Possibly not. So it's mad that we're talking about, a Sean O'Brien who 2 years ago was absolutely brilliant in the Lions.
He's got to take one of these chances.
Because opportunities have been taken away from others through injuries. So, I think Leinster will feel as though they've managed to navigate their way through. They know they don't have a second chance.
Yeah, that's Brian O'Driscoll there talking about Leinster's chances against Toulouse on Sunday. Another part of that team news we mentioned Keith Earls missing. For Leinster though, it looks like Jamison Gibson-Park is going to be out. That makes Leo Cullen's decision for him over, is it James Lowe, Jamison Gibson-Park or Scott Fardy? Yeah,
because there was some suggestion earlier in the week that it might actually be Gibson-Park and Fardy who get it, which it would have been incredible to think again that James Lowe would miss out. And the one thing about if that had happened is you're having your two overseas signings on the bench, to leave out a game breaker like James Lowe, and geez, it must be tough. Those conversations that Leo Cullen must have with those guys must be extremely tough because they are all meritorious, worth their place in the squad. Obviously,
and players who probably would walk into most other starting 15s.
Absolutely, and the thing about Gibson-Park is though he becomes Irish qualified in June, so obviously for next season this won't be an issue. I think Scott Fardy was probably always going to play anyway because he's just such an important player, but with Mick Carney and Ross Maloney ruled out, that kind of made that part of the decision. So in one way maybe Leo Cullen, it makes it a little bit easier that his hand is forced, but I think everyone wants to see James Lowe playing at the weekend, don't they? We haven't seen enough of him this season. We've barely seen him since he got sent off actually in Thomond Park over Christmas, so I'm sure he'll be itching to get out there and prove a point on the big stage as well.
Are Leinster as good as they were 12 months ago?
No, I don't think they are. I mean, I think they were so good last season, and you look at the calibre of players they lost: Easton Asewa, Joey Carberry, Jordy Murphy, who his worth has been proven, I think, since he's left, because you see how well he's playing for Ulster, and he's right back in the World Cup frame now with the injuries. I don't think they are as good, but that's not to say they're not good, if you know what I mean. They were at such a peak last season, but for them to drop down, they could still do the double again this year, and I don't think anyone would be surprised. But you kind of forget that when Toulouse beat them over in Toulouse, that Leinster threw 2 intercepts that resulted in tries. So I think they'll be mindful of that as well. They absolutely, Quinny was mentioned there, they smothered them at the RDS, and I thought Toulouse were really disappointing that day, but they're better than what they were in January as well. I think, is it 2 defeats in 23 games, and they had that mad game against Clermont at the weekend, which it looked great, and the razzle dazzle was kind of similar to the quarter final against Racing. But will that work against a Leinster side? I don't know. Toulouse have plenty of firepower, but I think they'll offer up chances. I think Reggie Sonis actually is worth a mention.
You're writing about him as well, aren't you?
Yeah, he's a really interesting fella. He spent 3 years in Bandon in West Cork, and there's been this horde of Munster players who've come through in the last couple of years. He likes of Finney and Wycherley, his younger brother Josh, who just won the Under-20s Grand Slam. Very exciting prop coming through. The Coombs cousins, Gavin, Liam. So West Cork rugby has really been on the rise, but basically Reggie Sonis, a former flanker for Toulouse, came over and he wanted to take a step back. He came from Bordeaux, step back from the sort of demanding professional environment, and he went in and he worked in Bandon RFC, and he worked in Bandon Grammar, which I don't know if you've seen as well, the Munster schools, like they're on the up as well. So he's
got the final, was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, I think it was year 4. They've done, he did an incredible job, but he was so laissez-faire when he was walking around with his beret and his Crocs around.
Yeah, there was that great photo as well of him walking into the RDS this year before the Leinster game, and just beret, Crocs, holding his cup of coffee.
You can imagine him walking around the streets of Bandon like that. But it's a great story, because when he arrived, I was writing about it to the paper, we were chatting to Richie Gray during the week about him, and the people at West Cork couldn't believe that they got a guy of this calibre. Like, I mean, he was in demand by the top European clubs, which was proven when Toulouse paid a lot of money to get him back. So sorry, the point about it is he has brought a bit of an edge to that Toulouse pack, and that's what Richie Gray was saying, that, you know, he's from Toulouse, he played for Toulouse, he gets what the culture is about, and that's been a big part of it. You look at Hugo Mola, Clement Poitrenaud, and William Servat, obviously all former top players at Toulouse, and they're all on the coaching staff now, and that's been a big part of the renaissance of Toulouse. And Reggie Sonis has brought that real hard edge to the pack. I think they're 100% in their set piece, the scrum.
100% in scrums. I think they are. Did I take it down here? They are in. I think they're second for line-out. Saracens are first.
Like, that's pretty good going, and especially for a French team. And what he was saying was that he drills them a lot, and it's a lot of repetition, whereas the stuff you hear about French rugby is it's not like that. It's way more relaxed, so that makes them an even more dangerous proposition. But I guess the people in West Cork can sort of half claim Reggie Sonis.
One thing we actually haven't really spoken about at all, and it's a story that would have come out probably just after the lads would have been finished yesterday on OTB AM, but Rory Best confirmed he is going to retire fully after the World Cup in Japan. It was something you were talking about when you came into the office this morning, how, you know, it was unofficially confirmed probably for the last few months, but it wasn't until yesterday when we had the official line that it was going to happen in the press conference. And you know, you were saying you were actually, given that it was a poorly kept secret probably over the last few months, you thought it was surprising just how emotional Rory got yesterday. Yeah,
it was funny. I actually did an interview with him over the phone last Friday that hasn't been published yet, and I didn't really go too much into it because he's been asked so much about it, but he dropped loads of hints that it was coming, and it was fairly obvious, but I wouldn't say he was emotionless, but there wasn't much emotion in what he was saying. He was very comfortable. Again, it was over the phone, but yeah, yesterday when he sat down and the cameras were on, I was really taken aback by really how hard it hit him. Even for the first question, he was barely able to speak, which I thought it was great to see. It showed how much it meant to him. And this is a guy who's obviously the captain of Ireland, and then he does a lot of press conferences for the captain's run, and he's just such a steady hand. He never really shirks anything. He's always positive in what he says. But yeah, it took me by surprise. It was good to see. He brought up his brother as well, and the conversations that he had with him, and I think that reminded him of how special it was to get a chance to play with him. But look, he's had an incredible career, hasn't he? He was sort of saying to me that the last couple of years he has really felt it in his body, and that in a few years' time he wants to actually... Tim lining out there, you can see it on the screen, alongside his brother Simon. Picture, Simon would have been forced to retire in 2008. It was actually an irregular heartbeat in the end that forced Simon Best to retire. Yeah, I was just saying he's one of those players who kind of you haven't really seen or heard much from him. Yeah. But Best was saying that he's been feeling it. He said he doesn't like to show it, but he has been feeling it in his body. And you look at it, he's got I think 3 young kids. and you look at the way he plays the game, he hasn't changed really his style of play. He still goes in for the jackals, and you see how, you know, it's such a controversial topic at the moment, but he's conscious, I think, of, you know, in the next few years he wants to be able to play with his young kids, and this is important. So yeah, the World Cup is just a fitting ending, isn't it? You know, the Ireland captain hopefully going out on a high.
Is he a lock for a starting place in Japan?
I still think so. It's definitely debatable. I think if Niall Scannell was to have an outstanding game tomorrow and Munster were to win and go on to win the Champions Cup, I think the debate might get a bit more heated. But yeah, I think so. For me, he is. He's not the same player he was, but he's such a massive leader. Obviously, his line-out throwing can be an issue, but to make such a big change at this stage, so close to the World Cup, I think wouldn't really be in Schmidt's sort of, you know, makeup. But then again, maybe he might surprise us all. But yeah, I think best main focus now is to make sure he gets back for Ulster's running, which he is hoping to do, I think.
Also as well, Ronan OGara writing this morning in the Irish Examiner. One little small snippet actually to take out of it. He's writing about how he's away in Fiji, having a little break at the moment. The Crusaders are on a bye week in Super Rugby at the moment. But he's saying that pretty much this rumoured move for him to France in the World Cup, it probably doesn't look like it's going to happen now. One of the things I promised with this column is keeping it factual. So while there's been a lot of speculation in recent weeks about me going to the World Cup as part of a French backroom team, I did say all along there was nothing concrete to report, and so it has proved. I had conversations with senior people in the FFR, and I was interested in a detailed proposition, but the conversation never got to that point, to the bit where a specific role working with specific people was on the table. I've heard no more in recent weeks, so I can assume it's off the table now. No surprise really that the move fell apart, because the French Rugby Federation couldn't provide enough details really, or enough of a plan.
Yeah, and in fairness, you gotta love Ronan OGara and how he handles himself in the media. I know he was on here with the lads and Off the Ball, and he's always so honest. I mean, he this is what he has said from day dot about this whole saga, and the French press had it that he was close to signing.
I just love how this wasn't like a big story. It's just kind of like thrown in midway through a column.
It's kind of classic his style, isn't it? I saw him, he was doing with the lads the other day, chatting from Fiji, like, you know, just off the beach. But I think he's played this very, very well. If he had gone in there, it was kind of a shot to nothing. If it had gone well, but it wouldn't have damaged his reputation. But he's still sitting pretty in one of the most sought after jobs at the Crusaders. And you know, the talk over there in New Zealand is that Scott Robertson could be another honorary Irishman, actually, who obviously spent time in Ulster, but he could be the next All Blacks coach. And if he gets the next All Blacks coach, and they seem to have a really good relationship, OGara and Robertson, you never know, OGara could end up there. So his career trajectory as a player was just always on the way up, and as a coach it's been no different. It's brilliant to watch.
He's obviously done all his work outside of Ireland, Racing, onto Crusaders, and who knows from here. Himself and Paul O'Connell are always being talked about. Anytime there's a sniff of any kind of a coaching vacancy in Ireland, their names are being thrown in. Let's get them back. Let's bring them back over here. Is it not better in the long run, probably for Irish Rugby and for the two of them, to stay out of the bubble for as long as possible? Because in the grand scheme of things, in terms of coaches, they're still young men. Still have there's potentially 20, 30 years of coaching still to go. To stay outside of the Irish rugby bubble and to learn as much as you can about various different countries, about rugby cultures, and bring it all back then at a later date. I just kind of wonder a little bit, what's the rush in bringing them back? As good as they might be when they come back, you know,
I suppose you're seeing...
Let them learn more.
Yeah, I suppose you're seeing two different sides of that, because OGara certainly is doing that over the last few years, but you look at Paul O'Connell now, he's leaving Stad at the end of the season a year early, and that's a move that didn't work out at all. Apparently, Heineke Meyer, the former Springbok coach, calls all the shots there. It's been very difficult, by all accounts, to get his stamp on the team. Heineke Meyer picks the team, doesn't always do the training with the forwards, so I think it's been very frustrating. Yeah, I think there's a point in that, but O'Connell still hasn't committed himself to, that he's going to be involved with coaching. On OGara, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the IRFU offices, that when they're possibly in line for a new attack coach, although there's some suggestion that Andy Farrell might actually take on more of a role as attack coach, would be very interesting. But when the IRFU were looking at one of their former players who will, let's face it, end up back here eventually, I wonder, are they going, okay, when is the time to pull the trigger and just get him back? Because when you see like the Crusaders, the type of rugby they play, and he has a massive hand in what they're doing. Some of the rugby that they play the best rugby in Super Rugby. So yeah, he's going to come back eventually. It's just a matter of time and when the RFU, I think, pull the trigger. It'd be interesting to see over the next few months, because obviously his contract's up at the end of the Super Rugby season, so he's going to be available technically unless he signs on again.
We're almost finished on rugby. One little quick thing we're going to bring up. Both of us spotted us this morning. This is in the Independent. It's a syndicated column from Austin Healy ahead of this weekend. Steady Blayandell may just be a better fit for Carbery than Carbery for Saracens' tie. Before we go into it, let's hear what Austin Healy had to say on BT Sport back in January 2019.
Probably better than Sexton, and if he could start for Ireland against England in that first opening Six Nations game, that'd be perfect.
So that was Joey Carbery. Probably better than Sexton. Now, though, he's out. Tyler Blayandell, do you know what? He's a better fit.
Yeah, it's a classic flip-flop there, isn't it? Yeah, like, I think I can kind of see... The point he was making was that Blayandell is a bit more of a controlling 2010, which is fair enough. But I still think you need the bit of, the game-breaking ability against the Saracens. It goes back to what we talked about firing a shot. Now, Blayandell is more than capable of doing it, but Joey Carbery has much more pace. He'll take the ball to the line much more aggressively. So I think that was his point. But yeah, it's an interesting flip-flop after basically saying that...
Look, yeah, we'll be fair to Healy. Like, he does qualify. He says Blayandell may actually suit Munster better for a game like this. He understands the game plan, kicks well and can move sides around. That becomes more of a threat against a team like Saracens, who are so... well drilled defensively, that it's going to be a tactical manoeuvre that beats them rather than a piece of individual magic and a lot of fighting spirit. And in fairness to him, look, he does absolutely sing the praises of Joey Carbery throughout that.